I'm Robbi Eklow. I make art quilts, and I'm in my studio at the Hot Shops, and my studio is 105. It's on the first floor, and it's big because I have my long arm here. And these are some of the quilts that I've made. And so I dye all my fabric. These are art quilts, they're not made for the bed. And I dye all the fabric, and then I fuse them together, and then I stitch them on my long arm. This is a piece of fabric that I've dyed, and as I said, I dye all my own. And this one I hung up on a garment rack, and then I poured the dye down, so you get this streaky look, and the dyes kind of mix themselves on the fabric. And I use a 100% cotton fabric that has no stuff on it. It's called prepared for dyeing, and so it doesn't have any sizing or anything, and it takes the dye really well. And so over here is my palette of most of my fabrics that I've dyed. I like to dye my own because then I can get different shades than what you would buy in the store. And I also like that look of the dye running down it. And so the quilt that I'm going to work on has 3 guitars on it. And I designed this on the computer. And then I use this stuff. It's called Wonder Under, and it comes by the yard, normally on a bolt. And I take it off the bolt and I put it on a roll. And then I trace the shapes that I need. This is a paper layer, and then here's a glue layer. See the glue? So I'll draw on the paper, and then I will cut around the shape that I want, and then I iron it onto fabric. So here's the paper, and here's the line that I would cut out. Or sometimes I just have reference lines to put other pieces of fabric under here, because I make sure that I have overlap, so there isn't a gap in the fabric. So, and this is the glue side, and then I can iron it onto another piece of fabric. Here's a flower that I made. I'm not sure where it's going to go. I just made it out of some scraps. But it's so on this side is the glue side, and you can see how it's overlapping, and then on this side is the good side. So this is my long arm, and it's called a long arm because it's big, and it travels on these tracks here. There's little rods here, and it can move this way on the tracks, and then this is the truck, and it can move this way on the truck. So it can move all around wherever I want it to go, and I guide it. There's some computerization in it, but it's not, I don't have the computer system to tell it where to go. I'm going to do the stitching, and it'll help me. But anyway, so this is called a long arm, and in our building used to be a mattress factory, and they used to use long arms to make mattresses. So my machine is very happy here, and it tells me that sometimes when I've been working too long. So this is the business side of my sewing machine. Well, the other side is if you're going to follow a pattern. But so I have it set up, and I have my quilt, the guitar quilt that I showed you. The thing about this machine is it has some computerization that keeps the stitch length the same, no matter where I move around. And I'm going to demonstrate that real quick here. This is a list. Just listen to the machine instead of, you're not going to see anything because I'm just kind of stitching on some batting over here. But so this only stitches when I move it. See, now I'm not moving it and it stopped. And the faster I move the machine, the faster it stitches to keep the stitch length even. And so that's called a stitch regulator. The other way to do it is non-stitch regulated, and in this case the machine is going to move at the same speed no matter how fast I move the quilt. So it would be my job to keep the stitches even, and I'm not good at that. So I don't do that very often, but I'll just show you what it sounds like. So I'm going to turn it on and see it's still running. And if if I move it faster, I just get giant stitches. So I prefer to use the stitch regulator. So when people do a traditional quilt, they'll start at the top and work their way down, and they do some stabilization and outline quilting and all kinds of other things. And I don't do that, I just kind of wing it. So first I'm just going to pick up the thread, the bobbin thread, because I want to control it so I don't have a nest of thread at the bobbin. So I'm holding it in this hand. Then I turn on the machine. And this design that I'm doing has a spiral in the center and then some petals. And that beep that you hear is just telling me that it's still regulating the stitch. This can only move a certain distance. It can move from here, I've hit the edge, to, well, all the way that way. But see how the curve of the machine only lets it go this far, because the rail stops it from moving. So I'm going to move my quilt forward a little bit so I can go in here. So on a domestic machine, when I free motion quilt, I work on the quilt from the center out, but on a long arm I work from the top down. Now we're at the farthest point, and I'm going to just move it forward. I have the needle in the machine so the machine moves with it. And then I also have my handy dandy, oh, there's petals down there. But I took nurse's call buttons and made my own control buttons. So I can sit on a big tall chair and I can stitch sitting on the chair if I want. So I'm just trying to stay on the yellow since I'm using yellow thread. Now I'm going to stitch on here just so you can see it. And when I'm working on a quilt, I always have something mounted on the outside of the quilt so that I can, if I have a problem, like a minute ago I lost some stitches, and I don't want to test it on the quilt because I don't want to have to rip it out. So I've just got a piece here. This is free motion, and I'm making some petals. Make some more. That looks very Art Deco-y. So generally, if I make a mistake, I just leave it in if I can get away with it. And by getting away with it, I mean if it doesn't annoy me. I have an engineering degree in construction management, but I haven't used it for a while. But I still use a lot of engineering in my quilts. I design shapes of tessellate going around in a circle, and I understand pretty well how my sewing machine works. And the other, also when you have a long arm, APQS expects you to be able to fix your own machine if things go wrong, because it's so big, it's not like you can throw it in your car and bring it to them. And also because I'm short, I can't reach, there's a thread rack back there, but I can't reach it. And I like to change my thread a lot. I make the thread match whatever I'm stitching on, so when I go to stitch on this purple part, I'll change the thread to purple, and I do it a lot. So I just Velcroed a thread rack on top here, and then this is something that doesn't come normally on the machine, and it lets you keep your hands closer to the needle. And the handles that were on it were making my hands tired, so a friend in Texas machined these hands and these giant bolts with holes in them so that I can turn it with a screwdriver, or jam something in there if I need it to turn it. You can see I like really loud, bright colors. I've tried to do muted, but I don't do it well. So I just go with whatever colors I feel like. So when we get started again, I'm probably going to have some classes on making quilts. I can make classes on dyeing the fabric and if you want to use long arm, the best way to do it is really go to a dealer and play with theirs for a while. And there's a APQS dealer in town. But I've taught a lot of people how to free motion quilt on a domestic machine, so I'll be having classes for that because I have enough space in here. And it's a lot of fun. And so I hope you stop in when you come to the hot shops to visit, and come and see me. I'm on the first floor, and you'll know that it's me because there's quilts outside.